Hey everyone, it's Megan Dooley here, coming back to you to talk about some more NBCOT exam prep lectures and things to just help you, especially if you are an auditory learner or like a little bit of visual guidance through how to navigate. I am using the NBCOT review and study guide, the 9th edition, to guide my review for you guys. So if you have that book, that will probably help you the best. But if not, and you're studying on your own, just go ahead and follow along with some of this. Take notes and dig through all of your years of notes and information that you have stored away for you. So we are going to start today. We're in chapter 3, starting on page 47 in the book, if you're following along. If not, we're going to be talking about the OT tools of practice. So today we're going to talk about occupation, purposeful activity, and task analysis and synthesis. So let's start here with occupation, the basis of our profession, and just defining occupation as things that we do every day. And also things that are goal-directed pursuits. So that means that it's something that we're trying to accomplish a task from that. Is that cooking so that we can eat? Is it getting dressed so we can go somewhere? There's an end to what we're trying to do with that occupation. The thing I want you guys to note for this OT tools for practice section, there's going to be a lot of little videos for this part because it's quite large, but this does comprise 37% of your exam. 37%. So that means that even though this may be stuff that you learned in some of your intro courses for school, you're really going to want to go back and review it and make sure that you have that foundational understanding of this information. What is an occupation? What are purposeful activities? What comprise those things? As this is going to be popping up in 30% of your exam questions. Again, if you watch previous videos, those exam questions aren't going to have you defining occupations, defining purposeful activities per se, but the question may say something to the regards of a whole bunch of information about an individual. There's examples in your book, but again, that application piece. So talking about somebody that has autism, their whole dynamic, and what purposeful activity will help them complete or pursue success in the occupation of dressing. Okay, so that's where you need to really have that foundational knowledge of what separates an occupation from a purposeful activity, and then how do we analyze those activities. Occupations. We all do multiple occupations every day, and something that you probably learned right away in the beginning of school is those areas of occupation and what they do for us as individuals. So something to really take into consideration here. I'm going to just spread this out for a second. If you guys can remember this, and it is important because it's what occupations provide for us. So if we look at mastery, occupations provide us an ability to become masters of things, okay? Self-actualization, self-identity, competence, and last but not least, social acceptance. Okay, so these are the 5 main areas that can be developed through occupations. We identify through what we do, not just our jobs, but getting dressed. What do we put on to wear? What do we like to cook? Our competence with schoolwork, playing, interactions. Okay, so these are things that come with occupations. Occupations all have a social, cultural, physical, and temporal context. So remember those contexts, okay, of occupations. When we look at that, what makes an occupation social? What are things that can increase that? So if it's play, it's socializing with friends. Shopping can be a social experience. The physical portion of that content or of that occupation of shopping, the mall, online shopping, computer use, those types of things. So all occupations come in a variety of contexts or a variety of settings, environments. Also, all occupations have a symbolic and spiritual component to them. Okay, so we may not all celebrate Christmas the same, or Hanukkah, or we may not all think of the 4th of July in the same way, but those occupations of what we're cooking when we're at that event, or how do we play with each other? Some cultures play with certain toys more than others. What about gaming systems? What about how do we interact in school? So there's symbolic and spiritual components to everything that we do, even what we put on to wear every day, even what we choose to drive for a vehicle, and the memories and the fruition that comes from that. So driving may be an occupation or that mobility piece. However, it does come with that symbolic or spiritual component of remembering when you first learned how to drive, who's been with you, your friends, trips that you've taken, okay? The other thing that you really want to review if you are thinking, oh yeah, okay, occupations, I know what they are, we do them all the time on fieldwork, but we also have this major component that shows up throughout your schooling and shows up when developing intervention plans. And this is going to be kind of a big section that I would focus on if it was me, because this is easily pops up in other things when we're planning interventions for individuals with autism, individuals with MS, stroke. And so if you are kind of unaware again of how that looks, so occupations can be used as a means or a method to change an individual's performance. Okay, so you're using that occupation in the middle of your intervention. That occupation, it's not so much if what they're doing with that occupation, but can it change their performance skills? So we may be doing something like, oh, let me think about this, playing a computer game to increase our visual scanning skills. Okay. We may be cooking, baking some cookies or cooking a grilled cheese sandwich to work on fine motor coordination. So that's occupations as a means. Okay, occupation as means is that component right there. I probably should have an A in there for you. Okay, occupation as an end is that you want to use that activity so that that person engages in one of those occupations that are listed in your framework. So we are doing activities so that they can get dressed. Okay, so the end is being able to complete that occupation successfully. So that changes our mindset. Occupation as a means, when I'm typing my note or when I'm observing that client, I'm looking at, if I'm playing a board game or I'm playing a computer game to look at fine motor skills, I am looking at the grasp. What are they doing? How is that grasp changing because of that game? But occupation as an end, if we were doing homework on that computer, is that individual able to complete that task of schoolwork and engaging in school? And that is the focus of my intervention. So this is really a key thing that, again, I don't write this book. I'm not taking credit for that, but just knowing the process of OT and being a professor and looking at what they really want from ACOT when we're in programs and things, this is really a foundational component of intervention planning. And that's what today's lesson or topic really are focusing on, is those foundational things. And then finally, those areas of occupation. And so if we look at the areas of occupation, remembering activities of daily living, okay, your toileting, bathing, dressing, your IADLs or your instrumental activities of daily living, medication management, shopping, health or Medicaid, I already said medication, safety, okay, your work, occupation, education, play and leisure, social, rest, and sleep. Okay, so those are all of those main areas of occupation. So looking at occupation, it should be a quick, easy way to review. This video probably is the most that you need if you don't have the book. So don't spend too much time, but really understanding occupations as a mean and occupations as an end. This comes up a lot when they're looking at top-down approach and bottom-up approach for treatment planning. All right, moving on to purposeful activities. Okay, so purposeful activities. Doing processes that are directed toward a desired and intended outcome that requires energy and thought to engage in and complete. Purposeful activities, something that you're going to do that is going to challenge our body, okay? Whether it's our mind and us physically, might be a little more physical than cognition at times, but it should require your attention to that task, not just a mindless ripping a paper or crumpling a paper. That's not a purposeful activity. Maybe a preparatory activity, okay? But purposeful is really looking at, requires our energy and thought to engage in. Energy and thought, okay? Characteristics of this. It is universal. Everyone does purposeful activities. We all do it. That's great because it means that it can extend across continents, across our country, to different populations. It's just identifying what purposeful activities that person wants to engage in. It is the foundation of skill building. So we use purposeful activities from when we are little all the way up into when we're learning new things. So if we are learning to play a sport, our purposeful activity of the full sport may be bumping a volleyball back and forth, okay? It requires thought, it requires action from me, it requires me to engage in that, but it isn't me playing the game of volleyball, all right? Foundations of performing occupation. So if we look at the task of cooking, okay? Cooking is a very large occupation, but the purposeful activities of that could be cutting up the meat, cutting up the vegetables, washing the strawberries, okay? It could be shredding the lettuce. So all of those, thawing hamburger, okay? That is a purposeful activity. It requires thought, it has purpose, but it isn't quite that whole gamut of things. So the nice thing about that is using purposeful activities, we can truly analyze different things. So if I have them just brown the hamburger, it's much easier to analyze than did they make tacos for supper tonight? Okay, so we break that task down into these purposeful activities. They've got to cut up the onions. Okay, how is their cutting? They need to brown the hamburger. Can they turn the stove on? Can they set the right temperature? Can they stir the hamburger? Did they season the hamburger? Okay, if they use taco seasoning, did they measure that correctly? So these things all start breaking down into these purposeful activities that lead us to that glorious taco salad that we're going to have that night. It's holistic in nature. So we're taking in purposeful activities mean I'm not going to have somebody playing volleyball or bumping a volleyball if they have zero interest in that sport. But if they really enjoy soccer, maybe I'm going to have them kick a soccer ball back and forth. That is a purposeful activity. We aren't playing all of the rules and all of the game, but it's something that they can relate to and see the function in it towards that goal that they want to get back to, that occupation. It can be adapted. The nice thing with putting a bunch of purposeful activities together is you can adapt those. So if I was doing soccer, we could sit down, we could kick with just one foot. We could make it harder by standing. You could add in different people you're kicking the ball to, or just maybe one person. It can also be graded, which is what I was just talking about, I guess. Graded, adapted. Adapting, I guess you could add in a bigger ball. You could change how many times they're going to do that. So I think adapted and graded go hand in hand for sure. We create verbal and nonverbal communication through purposeful activity. Okay, we learn how to communicate. So verbal and nonverbal communication. If we're cooking, are we able to communicate with words what we need to do next? If we're cooking with our loved one, it allows us that ability to build our vocabulary. If we're playing soccer, okay, my eyes looking at who I'm going to kick the ball to just created that nonverbal communication. Or I could say my partner's name, okay, Billy, I'm kicking you the ball, or Sarah. If you're playing a board game or you're doing some sort of an activity like that, talking through the different colors or whose turn is next builds communication. It's a provides structure and organization. So with the cooking task, when we have all these purposeful activities combined, it allows us to have organization. Here's this first thing. We're going to wash the lettuce, wash the vegetables. Okay. Now we're going to chop all of those. We're going to thaw the hamburger out if it's frozen. Mine's always frozen, so I guess I'd have to thaw the hamburger. And now we're going to brown the hamburger, but we're going to turn on the oven first, or the stove first. We're going to put the hamburger in there so that it provides a lot of structure to it, which then allows us to really look at where within those purposeful activities is that person struggling. With purposeful activities, doing is emphasized. Don't sit and talk about it. Purposeful activity is different than preparatory. Preparatory would be sitting and talking. So giving a worksheet that says, what are the steps to making tacos? Okay, we're going to mark them off 1 through 15. But the purposeful activity is actually doing step number 1, getting out the vegetables from the fridge. Step number 2, washing the vegetables. Okay, so that's the difference between preparatory and purposeful. Involvement with the physical, non-human environment is promoted. Hopefully the natural environment, if we can. Simulated versus natural. We like natural, but that's the thing. We want people to engage in their environment so that they can feel success, and also so we can identify where they may be struggling. Okay. And then this varies from conscious to unconscious, meaning sometimes you got to think really hard about what you're doing, and other times it may become more automatic. So that kicking of the soccer ball, if somebody, I'd say somebody had an amputation and they had cancer, and they had to remove part of the limb to remove the cancer. And that child or that young adult wants to go back to playing soccer, so they get their prosthetic, and we got to work on kicking. Well, initially, you're going to have to look and really think about moving that leg. But as this progresses, that purposeful activity of kicking is going to become more automatic. And now we can move back into a conscious activity, okay, which would be maybe kicking a certain direction or jogging a few steps and then kicking. We've now upped or graded that activity, making it more conscious and having to have that person really think about it. So with purposeful activity, key takeaways for that is that it does need to be something where you guys recognize that I'm just going to type it in here because some people need that visual thing. So with purposeful, you need to remember that it is doing the activity, not writing about it, not talking about it. Okay, so I know I just have all this other stuff on here, but purposeful activity, doing the activity, not talking about it, writing about it, etc. It needs to have meaning, okay? It has to have meaning to the client, okay? So those are some kind of key things to take away from that purposeful activity, is that purposeful activity, doing the activity, not talking about it, writing about it, etc. That would be preparatory, and it needs to have meaning to that client. So you want to make sure that you're not picking something that is what you want to do, not what they like to do or love doing, okay? So moving on to the last section, task analysis and synthesis. Huge part of what we do every single day. Okay, love this part of OT. And as that skill grows, really it's something that can be even bigger and better for everyone. So we're going to spend the last few minutes here talking about task analysis and the synthesis of a task. So let's just take a look here at task analysis. We know that this is identifying parts of a task or activity, and we need to be able to identify what abilities are needed to perform that task. So if I show you this, let's see, let's look at the whiteboard here. So task analysis. Identify that specific task. This stuff is something that, one, as a teacher, I would say, really practice this before you go into interventions thinking you're going to figure it out on the fly. But for the purpose of the NBCOT exam, specific task, okay? All things needed to do that task. How is it normally done? So if we take one component of cooking those tacos, let's say, and we're going to cut up veggies. How would we normally cut them up? Cutting board, a knife, we're gonna hold with our supporting hand, and we're going to cut with the other hand with a certain grasp on the knife, depending on what it is. Are we going to support with our elbow? How do we hold that onion? How do we hold that pepper? Practice this stuff or run through it before you go into that setting where that person has said, this is what I want to work on, but I've had a stroke. Think of all things needed to do that task. The cutting board, good lighting, the ability to stand at a counter or sit at a table, a sharp enough knife. Where am I going to put all of these things once it's on the cutting board? Are we going to put it in a bowl? Think about all of those components. I need an onion and a pepper. Do I get them from the fridge? How do I get them from the fridge? Why do you need to think of all of that? If your client has a walker, a wheelchair, every component of that task is going to be tweaked a little bit. So and then what you do from that is you're able to identify a frame of reference to figure out what you will focus on. If you are using the rehab frame of reference, because my client had a stroke, I'm going to look at remediation, but also adaptation. So if they're in that wheelchair, I might have to have them put their onion or peppers on a different shelf in the fridge so it's low enough. I may have to find somewhere else for them to cut because they can't stand at a counter. So are we going to have to sit at the table? How are they going to carry the knife and the cutting board? Now they have hemiparesis. How are they going to hold that object since I know I hold and cut? Okay, now I might get an adaptive cutting board. So that is task analysis. And as much as it seems so simple and straightforward, it is something that makes or breaks your therapy. And it is so important for this exam because it's going to be a part of all of your test questions to some degree. Analyzing, not all of them, but any of those case scenarios that are asking you to identify, this is the level they're at with their disease, spinal cord injury. This is the task you are having them do, put their pants on, okay? What is the best, treatment, or what is the best frame of reference for that treatment? So make sure, again, said today earlier, this is a huge component of this this big boards test. It's 37% for a reason. Occupations, activities, and task analysis go across all diagnoses, go across all age spans for your clients. And it doesn't matter if they're 90 or they're 2 months old, you have to be able to do these things to best treat your clients. And that's why NBCOT really focuses in on that, because this is the heart and soul of our therapy sessions for our clients. All right. The last thing that I'm going to just touch on is activity synthesis. So this is designing an activity or an intervention that is graded to meet the needs and abilities of the client. Okay, so the purpose of the analysis is so that you can figure out how to teach those activities or that ability to that client, determine their success with that activity, and then adapt or grade that activity. So once you've done the task analysis, what would this normally look like? How does this person perform now? That's that synthesis. So we're going to design that activity or that intervention around that client's ability. So that is activity synthesis. Design the activity or intervention that is graded to meet the needs and abilities of the client. You're going to have them do that activity. You're going to determine if they're successful with it. Then you're going to adapt it or grade it, either up or down, and adapt with more techniques, less techniques, more equipment, less equipment. Okay, so this is the section that's in Chapter 3. It's on occupation, purposeful activities, and task analysis and synthesis. So please reach out if you have any questions, and happy studying.